Good afternoon, Tim.
Good afternoon.
I see we got a new link.
Yes, the other one expired, so we had to start up again. So I guess we're good to go for the next couple months.
Good, good. Are you good to go for the next couple of months?
I hope so. So it's a little chilly today.
Oh yeah, I was just outside to do a couple of things. I said, "Uh-oh, too light for a light sweater. I have to switch over to a little light jacket there."
Yeah, and it's pretty. The sun is pretty, but it's chilly out for sure.
What just happened to the day we had a minute ago when it was 90 degrees outside?
Yeah, wasn't it last weekend with
Yes.
with Passover we had the air conditioning on, and now well, that's the time of year for you. It can be 85 one day and 55 the next day. So,
Yeah, well, I probably put out a couple of plants too early.
yeah, well, I've got my geraniums on the front porch. But the guy at the nursery where I bought them said, "Oh yeah, they should be fine." I'm like, okay, you know.
Yeah, well, okay. I did.
It's not supposed to go below freezing, and since they're on the porch, they're a little bit protected, so I guess they'll be okay. We'll see.
Yeah, I put out I was growing some elephant ears indoors, and
Yeah.
I moved them outdoors when the temperature, went above 70, and then it got really warm, and now the minute I put them out, of course, the temperatures crashed, and I'm regretting doing it. They look like they've been kicked.
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like I said, I talked to the guy when I bought the plants at the nursery, and he says, "Oh yeah, you should be fine. Don't worry about it." Because I thought, well, I'll wait, a couple weeks if I have to. But Figured they know. They work with the plants. They're the ones that are supposed to know.
Okay, 4/2/2021. Got it. Ah, good.
So we're
Hello, Larry.
good
There
afternoon.
you are. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Cold out there. Wow.
That's
I
what
know,
we're just
it's
talking
just-
about.
yeah.
Can't believe this.
I know. And I said last week for Seder, we're all with air conditioning. It's just crazy.
Yeah, really. Well, it's supposed to get a little nicer during the week, but I was really surprised just coming and getting the mail and everything. Just
No, it's
really.
yeah, it's cold. I mean, like I was saying, it's pretty out. The sun is pretty, but it's chilly.
Yeah, not what you expected this time.
No.
Yeah.
No. I was a little taken aback this morning, but oh well, like I said, it's this time of year, it's up, it's down, it's 85, then it's 55, then it's 75. And we're not shoveling
Yeah,
snow, so that's good.
Well, at least tomorrow will be a little warmer, and then we get back up into the 70s on Monday.
Okay, that's good. I can live with that. Of course, all of our Christian friends who are going to Easter services on Sunday, they're going to have to wear coats over their new clothes and everything.
Well, these,
Yeah, but they're getting a beautiful day,
Yeah.
bright and sunny.
the people that actually do an Easter parade, is that really a thing, or was that invented by Irving Berlin?
No, I was in New York City. This was several years ago, and it happened to be Easter weekend. And the weather was gorgeous and it was beautiful. And there are people who are out showing off their dresses and their hats and their new suits and their new shoes and whatever. So I don't know that it's like a formal thing that's been, declared by the city, but people do, go up and down like Madison Avenue and whatever. And there's a lot of people, if you're in the vicinity of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, that are coming and going after Easter morning, being at church. Oh yeah, there's some people that are really all decked out, So all you have to do is find yourself a cup of coffee, a place to sit and just, watch the people going by.
Yeah. I remember Fred Astaire, he had that nice gray suit that he wore, with like the spats and stuff.
Right. Oh yeah. Well,
And women had
Fred
the
Astaire-
special hats, the Easter bonnets, right?
Fred Astaire was always dapper. I mean, he always was.
Oh, yeah.
It was one thing about him. It's like, I think he was the kind of person that could make, a cheap suit look really good.
Well, he had that elegance of movement, that style, just that smoothness. Yeah.
I didn't inherit that in my family, that's for sure. But we're winding down Passover this week, and
Yeah. Goodbye to Passover.
Thank God.
You're tired of eating the same food. I mean, that matzah and cream cheese and jelly tastes pretty good the first day or two.
yeah.
After that, wow, it's
Well, do you ever broil it, put butter on it and some
No.
cinnamon and sugar and put it under the broiler?
no, like
Oh, it's
cinnamon
delicious.
toast,
Yeah.
butter and cinnamon toast. Oh, I
Yeah.
gotta try that.
Yeah, you make like a cinnamon toast version with matzah, and then the broiler gets it kind of, crispy and crackly. It's great with your morning coffee.
Oh, all right, I'll have to try that. That'll be an
I mean, you gotta look for all the different ways you can do matzah, no matter what.
They had a chef on TV from one of the organizations, I forget which one, that was doing some Passover stuff. And what he did was he took the matzah and he lightly soaked it.
Right.
And then he formed it, he broke it into smaller pieces, not crumbly, but into sections, and he used that as a crust. And then filled it with, I guess you could fill it with almost anything that you want, like he filled it with some sort of a meat dish, chopped meat and tomato sauce kind of thing. And then he put a topping over it of the same matzah, and he made like a pie,
Oh, okay.
almost like a calzone kind of thing,
Hey, that sounds
He baked
Like
it
lasagna.
like a lasagna, but he
yeah,
baked it in
like
the
a
oven.
matzah, a matzah lasagna, which
Yeah, and he baked it in the oven, and he had one that he was eating, and he said it was delicious. And I guess he added some
No,
other spices to
He
it.
said it was awful.
well, like I said, you get creative. You just got to be creative. It's all we can do.
Tim, go back over your matzah thing with your coffee in the morning. What did you do with it?
You just put butter on it. Get butter out and you have soft
Right.
butter. Spread a layer of butter on the matzah, then sprinkle cinnamon and sugar on the matzah, and then
Cinnamon and sugar.
put it under the broiler. And it gets bubbly and crispy. And then you can easily break it into pieces, and it's a delicious treat with your morning coffee.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's just enough. Hey, I'm always open to suggestions on how to use matzah in a new way.
I'm going to snack on that right after our meeting. I'm going to try it.
Sugar, cinnamon.
Yeah, I know. It's just, I used to have a cookbook. I think it was called 101 Ways to Prepare or Use Matzah, but I lost it somewhere along the line. I don't know what happened to it. So, although I will tell you a lot of the ideas in there were not very good.
Well, speaking of matzah, b'tei avon.
There you go. There you go. All right, well, let's get started. We have a special Torah portion this week for the holiday that is called Parashah Yom Shvi'i Shel Pesach. So for the 7th day of Passover, this is a particular Torah portion that is used for the holidays. As we know, with a lot of the major holidays, we stop where we are in our cycle of readings and we use special Torah readings, Haftarah readings for the holidays. So that is the case here with Passover. So specifically designed to coincide with the 7th day of Passover. So it takes us back to Exodus, no surprise there. And it's chapter 14, verse 30 until chapter 15, verse 21. So it focuses on the final part of the Exodus from slavery in Egypt. Remember that the word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, which really translates as narrow place. It was our narrow place. And we were moving away from Mitzrayim, our narrow place, to freedom with the promise of a land that would be all our own. And this is looked at by many great thinkers and rabbis as is really central to the whole notion of Jewish peoplehood or nationhood. Before this climactic event in the Torah, God was making covenants, but more so with individuals and their extended families. But with God's hand now guiding the journey from slavery, the covenant takes on a much greater and a grander magnitude. We now have the beginnings of a formation of a nation of people who are working under God's guidance and in tandem with God and God's power. As the flight from Egypt culminates with the parting of the waters of the Red Sea, the people have the opportunity to witness the most awesome spectacle that proves the mighty power of God. And it not only saves their lives and keeps them from having to go back to slavery, lets them go on their journey toward freedom, but as they look back, they also see it swallows up their former slave masters, guaranteeing that they will no longer be pursued, captured, and returned to slavery. So our ancestors were fortunate in many ways to have God on their side. They were also fortunate in a way that seems to elude most of us in the modern world. It has been a long, long time since anyone in our community, our modern community, has witnessed such a grandiose display of power and might. We just do not seem anymore to have the opportunity to witness grand and spectacular miracles as our ancestors did. Even on a smaller scale, such as encountering God speaking to us through a burning bush, these things just do not seem to happen anymore. And if they are happening, then somehow they're being kept very, very quiet, very secretive. So then we can ask the question of whether God today in our modern world has taken a sort of, quote, hands-off approach to our world. Does God now believe that we must defend or must fend entirely for ourselves? In other words, we either sink or we swim, for there will be no more parting of the waters to save us. It makes us wonder why God was so present in ancient days and just doesn't seem to be maybe so present much anymore today. Or is this a matter of the fact that we're just a bit more jaded today? We're just a bit more oblivious to the awesome power of God that does not indeed, doesn't God still surround us regularly? Well, first of all, yes, we are jaded. And as modern people, we are jaded. Most of us are highly skeptical of so much in the world unless we are given some form of concrete proof of an event. Our words are, show me, prove it. Where's the evidence? These are the words that we often hear people utter. Jaded? Yes, I do think that many of us, and perhaps most of us, are. But let's take a look at a very recent and relevant example of God's awesome power that all of us today can be witness to. We have been a world devastated by a pandemic. COVID-19 came into our vocabulary. Who could imagine something that we had never heard of before? But even more importantly, it came into our lives. And it disrupted nearly all that we knew as normal. Within a short span of time, how we work, how we socialize, how we worship, how we shop, how we learn, how we eat, how we exercise, and many, many more were all changed. At the start, none of us knew how long this change would last. None of us knew if this change would be a mere temporary setback or if it would become far more permanent. We had a lot of questions, but we didn't at that point have very many answers. We kept hearing on the news ever larger numbers of confirmed cases and even more sadly, a larger number of deaths. We seem to be living in our very own science fiction / horror film. Many of us wondered if we would ever be free of this new word in our vocabulary. Lockdown, shelter in place, work from home became the new reality. Entire businesses and industries just stopped, vanished. And with that, people's livelihoods were extinguished. It just seemed to go on and on and on. Now, here we are, a bit more than a year later, and people are lining up to receive one of 3 vaccines that are available. These are the medicines that may not completely stop nor end the disease, but they will certainly lessen the severity of it. People are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Some are returning to work, some are returning to school, businesses are reopening, people are once again considering the beauty of socializing with friends and family. A year is a long time, or is it? There was no parting of the waters here. There was no witnessing of a grandiose spectacle for a Hollywood-type film, but there is certainly something awesome that happened here. The greatest scientific and medical minds of our time came together and in a more rapid timeline that is typical, were able to devise a way to spare us, to save us. So where is God's presence in all this? Well, God has given us the intellect to solve a myriad number of problems. If you believe, and that's entirely up to you, then the hand of God was somehow guiding these men and women as they fervently worked to devise a vaccine. Maybe they prayed, maybe they didn't. Maybe they were religious, and maybe they were not. They could even be atheists. It doesn't really matter. Somehow, they were being guided in a way to help to calm a very fearful world. When you think about it in its own way, it is pretty awesome. Was this God? Is this an example of God with us in our modern world? I don't know, and I will not tell you what to think or what to believe. But there is certainly a very good chance that this vaccine and its availability does show us something of the awesome power of God at work in our world in 2021. So, I do think the power of God is still with us. It's just not that we're going to turn around and we're going to witness something as grand as the parting of the waters. The miracles around us are a little more subtle if we keep ourselves sort of open to the idea that, God's hand is here and maybe guiding who we are and who the people around us are to do great things, such as coming up with a vaccine that's helping to finally get us back to some semblance of normal. It's not as, grandiose as looking back and seeing the waters devour the Egyptians, but it's still pretty awesome. At least I think so anyway. So comments, or did I just cover it all? It's all good. We're all like on the same page.
I just say, someone said that when you have things called coincidences, that it's God kind of reminding you that God's still around.
Could
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
I helped someone with her stimulus check. She said, Tara, I can't get anyone to help me. My son's claimed me as dependent. He did this year. What do I do? And I got her through that. And she said, you're an angel. And I said, well, I just helped you with this, but no one else would help her. So it's a mitzvah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, we know the Hebrew word beshert, something was meant to be, something was fate, something was sort of destiny or whatever. And, maybe some of those things that are beshert do have the hand of God in them to bring the right combination of people together, or the right minds together to work out whatever needs to be worked out, or solve whatever needs to be solved. I mean, it's pretty rare to think of a vaccine that is so quickly, found and then okayed and brought out to the public. I mean, it's just pretty incredible when I think about, a year is a long time, but we're really grateful that right now we have this vaccine available to us.
That's kind of like the comment of, the guy was an overnight success that took 20 years to develop. In other words, he stood on the shoulders of all of the failures and successes before him. And I think that's what they were saying, is that they did lay a lot of this groundwork for this thing, many, many, many years before. The problem I find with the argument is that if you give God credit, for, giving us the guidance along the way, then you also have to kind of question him as far as some of the bad things. If he's giving us that sense of control, over human destiny to make these kind of good decisions, why has he given us also the control to make also these very bad decisions that have, taken 550,000 lives? Why did he bring the plague in the first place? Why did he, if you were an Orthodox person, you would probably say, well, it's God's will and we just don't understand it.
Right.
It's just been revealed to us. So
Larry, that's what I was thinking too. Plus I was saying, maybe this is God's installment of another test of Job, which I never could quite understand either when we did the Torah readings on that. So.
Yeah, I mean, if God's going to be credited with the good, then I guess God has to be credited with the not so good, or the downright bad sometimes too. As much as, the hand of God, I mean, God made us with our intellect and abilities to do whatever we can do with them in whatever fields we are good or we excel. But even with this, looking at this as the hand of God guiding the people who made the vaccine and were able to get it out to us very rapidly. But then I sit back and I say, okay, if this is the case, where is the cure for cancer? Where is the cure for HIV/AIDS? We were able to come up with this very, very rapidly. We still have a number of very, very deadly diseases out there that we have not yet, these scientists and these people in the medical field have not yet been able to conquer. This one they were able to do very quickly. Why are they not able to do the others? And we're still floundering with, how we deal with it.
Yeah, just hearing the testimony this week from some of the, like Dr. Burks, who was in the White House, she said a lot of this could have been avoided had we been acting a lot smarter earlier.
Right.
Instead of 550,000, maybe it would have been after the first 100,000 deaths. You
Right.
could have saved almost 500,000 people.
But that's where you get the free choice.
Well, or the leadership deciding on
I mean,
your
no,
choice. Yeah.
I mean, she had a choice at that point. Should she tell the public what she really felt, or should she go along with what he was saying?
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to be rude here, but I don't really hold her in grand esteem because she could have spoken out. Would she have been fired, and would she have been, some other way censored? Of course she would have been, but at least there would have been someone with the knowledge, with the medical background, a medical degree to say, look, this is the reality. What you're hearing from the president or whatever is not the reality, and you need to know the reality of what's happening. So, I mean, yeah, you can look at it that way too. I mean, there were a lot of people who were lauding her for what she said recently. I'm like, no, you should have been saying this months ago, when it could have made a difference in the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. And, they're gone now. We can't bring them back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, had she, spoken out sooner and seen this, maybe she would have been fired, but at least she would have said, yeah, there's a danger here. As Trump has said in the interview himself, there was a danger here, but he tended to ignore it. So he was totally complicit. Maybe she thought along the way she could change her mind, but I think if you see a danger, you've got to warn people. That's you're taking that Hippocratic oath as a doctor, and not only as a doctor, as a human being. If somebody sees a potential danger, they have to go ahead and basically tell people, there's a danger in this situation.
Well, and it's also, I mean, if you look at, our as Jews, pikuach nefesh overrides everything in Judaism. The saving of life, the saving and health and whatever overrides every other thing in Judaism. So if you see danger or you see people who in some way are threatened, yes, it is your responsibility if it comes down to saving lives and saving the health of human beings, because that takes precedence over everything. Even in Orthodox Judaism, if having to ride in an ambulance to the hospital will save someone's life, it doesn't matter that it's Shabbat. It doesn't matter what the restrictions on driving or riding in a car on Shabbat are. It comes to saving the life. And that's what's most important. And so from our theology as Jews, yes, she should have spoken out as soon as she understood, as soon as she knew the reality of what was going on. It was her duty. And yes, she takes a Hippocratic oath, and that's part of what, as a doctor, she is supposed to do. And choosing to remain silent in order to keep her job or to placate the president or to not want to contradict the president, I'm sorry, it doesn't cut the mustard with me.
Yeah, it's sort of like, the well-respected arguments that Harold Kushner has made, in, when bad things happen in his book. But he basically, even after like 9/11, and the bombing of the World Trade Center, where he said, well, look at the miracles here. That these people, not only 2,300, but somebody was there and they survived and things of this nature. I think it's kind of like almost like a spin.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Taking on it to, to point out, sure, it could have been worse. 6 million died, but maybe 7 million could have died had we not gone to war and, or 10 million or, the entire Jewish nation. I mean, sure, it could have been worse.
Well, yeah, and I call that, in my own language, I call that the Pollyanna effect. Those who just want to look at, well, it could have been worse. Well, we could have this, that, whatever. And it doesn't really quite sit very well with me, the idea that, yes, it could have been worse. I mean, the saying that people use a lot, and I don't know that people stop to really think about it, is, well, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. And of course,
which is a saying that if you want to get on my bad side, that's the easiest way to get on my bad side.
And part of the motivation, for basically creating such a quick response was that's what drug companies do. I mean, they're in it for profit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not like, they're enhancing the world because they don't want to make a profit out of it. I'm sure that part of it is, that they're interested in the science, but also, look, the faster, it was a race, to get there first. So
Right.
The fact that there was a competition going on, among smart groups of people to develop this vaccine really quickly, I think, so I think a lot of it goes into, did God have a hand in it? Well, if you believe he created us and he gave us the
ability to think.
The ability to think, the ability to reason, the ability to do right from wrong, then yeah, sure, he had a hand in it.
Well, I mean, let's face it, the pharmaceutical companies, you're right, they're about money, profit, and whatever they can do to up the profit is what they're going to do. And there are people who believe the reason why we don't have a cure for cancer is there's a lot of money in it for the pharmaceutical companies to not, and for the medical community to not come up with a cure. So it's money making not to have the cure. So maybe the motivation, because of the profit motive, keeps
Yeah.
the cure from being discovered. Or is it out there and they're keeping it from us?
Well, no, I think though the competition is good. I think that's what it proves as well. Competition among the countries and competition among, it's one case where nationalism, getting to the moon first or being the first one to develop the vaccine, or as Biden said in his speech today, we're the first one to have, 20 million people vaccinated and, in a week period or something, so there's always pride, in nationalism, which is a good thing.
Right. I mean, so often, we hear about the dangers, and there are many, to being overly nationalistic. I mean, Nazi Germany certainly proves that to us. But sometimes if it moves us towards something that is going to be beneficial toward humankind, then that's a case where, okay, fine, win the race, get it on the market, and start saving people's lives, So.
You had mentioned that this Torah portion is from Exodus.
Yes.
Now, we had already done this Torah portion, right?
Well, yes, it's an excerpt from a larger portion. They just take a smaller section of it to focus on for the seventh day of Passover. The one thing I didn't really focus on that is in this Torah portion as well, this is the Torah portion where we have Miriam dancing once they cross the sea, and rejoicing in the fact that they have finally found their freedom. So it's there's that uplifting element, the words that we now have in the Shabbat liturgy of the Micha Mocha, as the words that we still recite, all the time, because it was such a wondrous, wondrous thing. One very, very, I guess, I don't know what the word I want here is, downer sort of commentary that I was looking at and said, yeah, well, that's all well and good that they're dancing and singing and they're feeling real good. And the next day they're going to look out and say, where the hell are we? And where the hell are we going? So have a good time and rejoice and celebrate, because the next day, the reality of, okay, now you got to keep going and you don't even really know where you're going. Yeah, Flossie?
What day did the Red Sea part?
What day of the week was it?
No, not week, but when they were on their mission of leaving Egypt.
I don't know that it tells us specifically.
Okay, all right.
Whether, how many days. I mean, when you read it in the Torah, it seems like they take off out of, Egypt, but, and then of course, Egypt is a nation. It's a big place. And then how far they had to go before they even got to the shores of the Red Sea. Was that the first day? Was that the second day? I mean, everything in the Torah for the entire Exodus story is very compact. It makes it sound like it happens, one thing right after the other. But most Torah scholars, as I said, when you get to the plagues, there was a lot of lag time from one plague to the next. They didn't happen, rapidly. So had they been on their journey for several days or maybe even weeks by the time they got to the shores of the sea, and then, oh no, what are we going to do now? We can't, walk on water. That would happen later. The one thing that we don't have, and the one thing that the Torah frequently does not give us, is an accurate timeline that makes sense historically to us, because they compact the details down. So I guess perhaps just to keep the Torah from getting too long or whatever, like what happened between plague 1 and plague 2? What was going on? So we have the plague, and did that last for a long time, or did it come and it go? And then what was the after effects of it? Those are all questions we don't know. We don't have the answers to, because the Torah doesn't tell us.
And there isn't much archaeological evidence, but they did find one of these, what they call a stela, which is an engraved kind of with hieroglyphic information on it in Egypt. And they did find that there was some kind of a warning for slaves who were escaping. This was prior to supposedly the Exodus, but they may not have been even Jewish slaves. They could have been, Hebrew slaves. They could have been slaves in general, and how they were captured. And that it was kind of like, I remember we had heard a lecture from a Rutgers University professor, a Hebrew professor, and he talked about, he showed pictures of it. It's in one of the museums someplace. So apparently it was kind of a well-known path, and apparently there is something as far as, is there a mention in Exodus of the path that they took, of the town that they went to, which is near the Sea of Reeds? Because apparently he seemed to allude to the fact that that was a well-known path for escaped slaves to have taken. So there was a good chance that the Israelites knew that particular path as well.
Well, and it could have been, a path that was also used by, trade people at the time as well, journeying from point A to point B. I know that in the Plout commentary, there are maps, and it shows possible suggested routes from what historians think. And it's got more than one marked, because I guess they don't know exactly specifically. But, I suppose you can look at topography and things of that sort and get some sense of what would be the most logical or sensible route from, wherever they left to getting to the sea and then crossing the sea. I mean, and they do know that there are times when the Reed Sea, because of the various climatological conditions, becomes very, very shallow in certain points, and so that could have also been, if you're looking to try to make it a little more beyond just the miracle of it, but a more sensible look at it, it could have been one of those times when they made the crossing. And then by the time the Egyptians showed up in pursuit, the waters were coming back in and the very shallow elements had disappeared. So the Hebrews were able to move their way across by the Egyptians. Plus the Egyptians had all their chariots and whatever. And when water recedes, it leaves behind a pretty murky, mucky mess, for a chariot. Not that I've ridden a chariot anytime recently, but,
Tim,
Yes.
is there any rhyme or reason in the order of the plagues?
Well, it's supposed to be, what they tell us is that they're supposed to be increasing in severity. So each plague is supposed to be a bit more severe in its impact on Egypt and the people in Egypt than the one before it. Because in each case, okay, this is bad, so maybe he'll say we can go, and then he changes his mind. Okay, so now we got to up the ante a little bit and make this one a little bit worse, because then maybe he'll say we can go, and then of course he changes his mind, until finally we get to the whole notion of, the angel of death and the slaughter of the firstborn, etc. Because I don't know that you can get much more severe than that,
Is the one before that darkness?
Trying to think back to the Haggadah and the order in which they go.
Because I would imagine that would be a very difficult one.
Right, and it's supposed to be from, if you look at the commentaries on the darkness plague too, it's supposed to be dark beyond dark that we even understand. I mean, if you've ever been out in the country, and where you can't really, and there's no stars, it's a cloudy night, you're not getting anything from the stars, the moon, nothing, a kind of dark that is all encompassing, where, you can't see anything. Kind of like the drive between Bluffton and Savannah at night. That drive at night, it's beautiful during the day, the trees and everything, the sunlight is coming through, but I will tell you, that is one dark, dark stretch of road there between Bluffton and, getting to the bridge till you cross over back into Savannah.
Especially in a chariot.
Well, yeah, in a chariot, it could be even. The other thing that I found, and I've only done it, and it's not something I really relish, let me tell you, the number of deer.
Yes.
And then, deer leap, without, they're sitting there, they're on the side, and you think, okay, that's all well and good. But then they decide to make a mad dash. And if it happens to be in front of your car, well, we all know what happens there. So I understand when people say they have the trepidation about driving that after dark, because it takes a lot of concentration. Even though it's not that many miles, it's a lot of concentration.
Yeah, it's a lonely road.
It is. There's not, yeah.
Yeah, and all you need is some drunk driver or, it's a 2-lane highway, one in each lane, no separation.
No.
One good part of it, yeah.
And in a lot of places, there's not even much along the side if you need to pull off. I mean, you're
Smart.
looking at pretty
Yeah.
wooded, solid wooded areas on both sides of the road. So
Just getting back to the commentary for a minute, does Plout or any of the commentators that you've seen talk about the hardening of the heart?
You mean
Why did he harden why did God harden Pharaoh's heart when he seemed like he might have given in? He said, no, let me just, have him make a change of mind here.
they talk about the idea of this severe test of will. Remember that in the eyes of the Egyptians, Pharaoh was a god. And so it's sort of like this test of wills, test of minds, God versus what the Egyptians would think of as God. And the hardening of the heart is, I'm not going to have another God beat me. And so it becomes this sort of test of wills and as I said, as the plagues increase in severity until finally God wins, the Hebrew God wins and takes Pharaoh down. But I don't know, there is supposed to be this sort of battle of wills. And so the hardened heart is like, no, I'm not giving in. No, I'm not giving in, until finally at the very end, okay, finally giving in.
Yeah, because that always, of course, it prolongs the story a little bit to make it even more dramatic.
Oh, of course.
He never did give in. All those
No, I mean,
going into the sea, he never really gave in.
that's true. Because even after they do finally escape, he obviously had a change of heart again, because he sends them out to bring them back. And unfortunately, they all get drowned in the sea. But yeah, I mean, it really is the point where he even at the very, very end, he doesn't really change his mind, at least on a permanent level. He may have and had to think about it a little bit longer and, and ruminate upon the whole thing. But then ultimately, no, go out, find them, bring them back, and I guess there's the point where it's fortunate that they do get to the sea, and the sea becomes the victim or becomes the tool for swallowing them up and getting rid of them.
What's interesting also is historically, of course, we don't know exactly the time frame, but they think it's, let's say, the great builder of monuments was Ramses at the time, let's say,
Right.
the time of Moses and stuff like that. And, he's got this tremendous labor force, which is helping him build many of these monuments. And of course, they weren't the early pyramids. That was a much, much earlier dynasty. So these were, things that were done in the Valley of the Kings, maybe, or some of the underground monuments and things in Egypt. But the Egyptian empire did not collapse. One of the things that they talk about in American slavery was that the wealth of the South, and in a way, the wealth of the United States, was built on the wealth of the slaves, and that the slaves, being a free labor market, created this tremendous amount of wealth for people in the United States and their economy, and that the whole South collapsed because, they didn't have their labor force. Now, all of a sudden, you could almost say, well, what happened in Egypt? They didn't disappear. They were still a pretty big power.
Right.
Even after the Exodus.
I remember reading, and this was many years ago, that in Egypt, at the time of what they think was the Hebrew enslavement, that apparently there were many other peoples, tribes, if you will, that were also enslaved, that it was not just the Hebrews, and that a lot of historians think that some of those slaves who were not necessarily Hebrews decided to cast their lot with the Hebrews and leave when they left, but many of them did not. So it would seem like there would be perhaps a dent to some extent in the labor force, but if there were other peoples who were also enslaved, they could then foist just more work upon them until they could rebuild, to the point where they had their labor force as they'd had it before.
Oh, you have to get our tickets. You have a lot.
And of course, Verdi's opera Aida, talks about that, because the battle between Aida, whose father was the king of a different neighboring nation in Sudan or someplace that was captured, and so there probably were many historical places where, one nation captured another and took slaves. not necessarily Hebrew slaves.
Right. Yeah. I mean, according to what they understand of the way that, conflict and warfare worked in what we would think of as the days when the stories in the Torah were taking place, when one group of people, one nation conquered another, it was just customary to take a certain percentage or a certain number of them into enslavement. That was just part of the spoils of war, if you will, was to make some part of those people who had been conquered into slaves. So, warfare, conflict seemed to always lead to, upping the population or the slave population as well.
Yeah, I know in the book Walking the Bible, which they had a TV series on it, I'm sure,
Right.
sure you read the book as well. He kind of goes through the numbers to some extent just based on the size, of how many people could have stood on Mount Sinai or how many people could have been on the foothills of Mount Sinai and how many it would have supported at the time. And, he comes up with much, much smaller numbers than, you're led to believe that were in the Bible at the time. And of course, I think we recognize now it's probably not a one-day event. It wasn't
Right.
like, it was a series of events that took place over possibly 100 years.
Right. And plus, I mean, we know, when we get to the census and they start giving us the numbers, historians know those numbers it would be impossible to be truth. That they are highly inflated, and it was certainly a fraction of the numbers that were given. And I remember Rabbi Haas even talking about that at one point, is that, we have to sort of take this with a grain of salt, but the larger numbers create a greater magnitude to the story, I guess.
Right.
But we know that they could not have been. We don't know, from what I understand, exactly, when the Hebrews up and leave and take flight out of Egypt, just how many were there, that were actually making this journey. We are never given a precise number. Are we talking about, 200, 300, 700, 1,000? I don't know. And how do you keep, the larger the number, the harder it is to keep everybody moving and to keep everybody together, moving along to where they need to be. It becomes something that almost becomes impossible.
Yeah, actually, from the time of Joseph, let's say, when he was prominent in Egypt till the time of, the Exodus, when, it's probably only a couple of 100 years, right? 200 years or so.
Right.
And, if Joseph came if his brothers came and the father came, we don't know how many people would have come and how many people could have been the family of those Jewish settlers, to have made such an enormous population in Egypt at the time, of Israelis. Unless Joseph brought, the 12 tribes and all of the family for the tribes, and then even geometrically, it just doesn't seem to
Right.
You start with a dozen people or let's say 50 people from all of the 12 tribes.
Right.
They would have come, and then over a period of 100 or 200 years, I haven't done the arithmetic, but
No, but there's a finite number of people that could have been born. That's just reality,
Yeah.
So,
Tim, I got to run, so I just want
Okay.
to say,
all right. Good to see you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Have a
Shalom.
good weekend.
Shabbat Shalom.
Right.
Shabbat
Bye.
Shalom.
Yeah, I just think, when it comes to the Torah, we just have a lot that we just don't know. So we fill in. Historians have tried to, give us what they can figure out. Are there still things that are yet undiscovered that may give us more clues? Very likely. Very likely. It's amazing how, we'll get nothing, and then all of a sudden some discovery opens up a whole new, spin or a whole new look at something that we thought we would never figure out. So they're doing, I remember just when we were in Israel 2 years ago, the amount of archaeological digging and things that is going on, it never stops. It's going on somewhere all the time, and looking for this and looking for that. And you don't know what you're going to find. You may find nothing, then all of a sudden something, and it starts to unlock something, some aspect of something we didn't know before.
And very expensive also to do the archaeology.
Oh yeah.
Very, very expensive. It takes, a lot of hands on board, with toothbrushes and things like that to
It
unearth.
always seems, I think it sounds like such a cool thing, but then I think it's also got to be extraordinarily tedious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you are the one person who happens to find something, whatever it might be, what a grand excitement, to be able to add a piece to, history. But how many hours of backbreaking, tedious labor have you had to work for that? And how many of those archaeologists do it day in, day out and never find anything of any real consequence or significance?
Were you in Egypt?
No, I was just in Israel.
Yeah, we were there several years ago. We went to Egypt and we actually took a whole week actually in Jordan as well. So we stood actually on the site. Supposedly there's a marker there. I don't know if it's the real site where Moses looked out over the valley and he was told he couldn't go into the Jordan Valley and, he couldn't go
Right.
into Egypt there. And they have a dedication, in Jordan. But yeah, you go into Egypt and the most remarkable thing is not in the tombs themselves, which have been devastated, because you can get into a couple of the tombs, but the Egyptian Museum where you see the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Mhm.
And that's where they unearthed, that was the only tomb, I guess, so far that they've unearthed that has not been disturbed, that they
Right.
found intact. And the stuff that they found in there is, just unbelievable. I mean, everything else that they found in the tombs of all the other, emperors of Egypt and pharaohs has just been ransacked and things like that. So, but this
Yeah.
one was just intact, and it just, you can imagine what the wealth of that country.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. But, it's like they keep trying, they keep looking, and, like I said, who knows what they may find at some point that will give us some further information on something we don't have, and, more power to them. Because, like I said, having watched them, when I was there, I'm like, oh, you do this all day. This is just,
Yeah, it sounds like fun. Yeah, but
it was fun to watch for a little while, but every day, ooh, that's a lot, and it's backbreaking labor too.
yeah, there's a recent movie on TV called The Dig, which is an interesting movie. I don't know if you got a chance to see that.
Well, I don't remember that for some reason.
It's on either Prime or Netflix or something. It takes place in England, and it's about they this on this particular farm. They find a what they think is some sort of archaeological evidence, and it actually predates the Vikings.
Oh.
So it's got considerable. It's the Hutton Sutton Hoo. We were in England. Actually, we saw it, and we didn't even realize the significance of it. But the Sutton Hoo exhibit, which is now in the museum, and what they go through to excavate that, and then which museum is provenance over it, which is and decide to find on the British Museum. But it's a good movie, very very good movie that shows a little bit about, and it's about this one guy who was an amateur archaeologist. That
Right.
He had this insight into some of these mounds that they saw, and he thought these mounds might be the ones that might be a clue to where things are buried.
Mhm.
Like Michener's book, The Source.
Yeah.
You look for the tell, you look for the mounds, and each layer. I mean, the way he wrote the book, I think, is beautiful. But
Right.
they discover a lot of things in the book. Of course, he gets right to it.
Yeah, it's it's a lot to dedicate yourself to. That is your livelihood. I couldn't do it. I'm just going to be honest. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I'm grateful when they find something, but it's more than I could do I couldn't do it for a day, let alone day in and day out. So good for them that they're that dedicated. So I guess we will wind up Passover, and then we will be moved. Well, we've got Yom HaShoah, Yom HaAtzmaut coming up, and then I believe Shavuos is mid-May this year. It's a little bit sooner than it often is.
Yeah.
We're looking.
Are there is anything? I'm sure there are for the Holocaust Memorial Day, anything of that nature. I saw that there was something on the internet about Savannah JEA doing something.
Yes, and I guess we are doing that along with them. The congregations are all going to be working with the JEA to commemorate for Yom HaShoah. Again, nobody quite feels comfortable doing, a big in-person thing like in the past. Hopefully next year we'll be at that point, but just not quite ready. As I said, we're getting ready to, from what I was told now, we're just going to go for services at Mikveh Israel. When we go back to in-person services, we're going to go right to Saturday.
Oh, really? Okay.
They were originally talking about doing Friday night first, but if the overriding feeling of people is that they want to have Saturday service. Because that's when most people were, in our congregation, that's when we would get the attendance anyway.
And we don't have to drive to Georgia in the nighttime anyway. That would be better for us in South Carolina.
No, I mean, and that's part of the thing is, a lot of people who are fine with coming, in the morning, late morning, early afternoon, and you don't have to worry about, getting back in the sun and all of that. So that overriding feeling was that we would get a better response of people just going immediately to Saturday Shabbat service. So I think that's the plan now.
I see. When will that start? Do you know?
The last I heard, and these things keep changing because this all comes down to discussions with the rabbi, the board, and everything. The last I heard is, I think, is it May 1st is a Saturday? I can't remember, but it's right at the beginning of May. Maybe May 1st, May 2nd. Let me see if I can quickly pull it up on my phone, my calendar. April, let's go to May. Yes, May 1st is a Saturday. So I think they're talking about May 1st.
All right, good. We'll try and be one of the first to attend because we'll be heading back to New Jersey after that.
Right.
So,
yeah, just keep watching. I mean, they're getting ready to send something to the congregation probably by mid-April, the protocols that'll be in place for coming to services and all of that. So just kind of keep your eyes open because they've been working. I know that like Leslie and members of the board and Jennifer and the rabbi have had myriad number of, get-togethers and meetings, small groups, large groups, to make sure that people can feel as comfortable and safe as possible when they return to the synagogue.
anything new on hiring a caterer?
That probably, lunches after service will probably be a little bit further down the road than that. I don't know that they've actually actively looked at this point for somebody, but I imagine they will be, as things get back to normal, as we have figured out, the services and everything, then maybe that will be next once we're comfortable that everybody's, comfortable coming back to services and all of that, then maybe that'll be the next thing. And when people feel like they can comfortably mingle again, in the social hall and all of that.
Our son and his family are coming actually tomorrow night for a week. The kids have off from school from New Jersey. They're going to be spending the week out here in South Carolina. They're going, not with us, but they'll be in Hilton Head, very close to us.
Sure.
We're going to go into Savannah for a couple of days, just
They
touring
won't mention
around.
the shul.
Yeah.
Is the shul going to be open at all for visitors or?
It's really technically not.
Yeah.
If you think you might want to, be able to get them in somehow, what I would do is I would just call Rabbi Haas directly.
Okay.
And just tell him that you've got family coming. And if there's any way that they could at least have a chance to come in and see Mikveh Israel, he might be able to help you out with that. I know there've been a couple of other situations where they've let, people in the congregation, as long as it's just family and, not outsiders and things.
Right. I know they did that for some special events. He was saying at one time,
Right.
Special bar mitzvahs or things of that nature. Yeah, actually, we're vaccinated. My son and his wife are vaccinated, and my own granddaughter's vaccinated already. So it's just the little kids that are not. So, yeah, maybe I'll ask him if.
Yeah, I would talk to Rabbi Haas just directly and just explain, when they're going to be there and figure out perhaps a day when there's not, something else that's conflicting. I know they do a lot of the service taping on Wednesdays. So that may not be the best day, but, just he'll be able to probably figure it out as to what's going on and, when it would be most workable.
Okay. All right. Good.
Because that's a decision that's beyond my, I don't have the power to say, yes, you can, or no, you can't. I always have to pass those questions on to the people.
You know that we.
Oh, I heard you were the go-to guy.
Oh. And frankly, I'm very happy because, those are important decisions. And I just say, well, let me connect you with the rabbi, or let me connect you with Jennifer, and you can talk with them.
All right.
All right, everybody, enjoy the weekend, the end of Passover, and Shabbat Shalom. And
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
And-
shalom.
And I didn't get a chance to say hello to Terry. But hi, Terry, and goodbye, Terry.
but
I-
yeah,
Terry, how was your Passover?
Oh, interesting. I picked up the food at Mikveh Israel and just followed along. And
You attended the service that the rabbi did?
yeah,
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, we were unable to do it. We actually were in a small group in another person's home, and so we had a little Seder, but it was a good Seder.
I think so. It's just me and the cats.
Jewish cats. There you go. Well, our cat was very Jewish because our cat found the afikomen.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
So,
why did you get your cat?
Well, he loves his little cat treats. So I said, okay, get extra cat treats for finding the afikomen.
yeah.
Actually, I have a picture somewhere of him with the afikomen. I'm going to have to show it because he's really got the afikomen.
Yeah, I just saw a cute thing with they come to the door. You know how you're supposed to open the door for Elijah,
Right.
and you come to the door, and all you see is a mask. That is facing you. You don't see Elijah, but you just see a mask.
Yeah. Well,
And come on in, Elijah.
right. That's very appropriate to our time period. That's for sure. So
Yeah. Well, he probably had his vaccination.
I would hope, being Elijah, he should be able to go to the front of the line.
But he visits a lot of people.
Yeah, really, if he's busy on Passover, he's just got to go from door to door to door. So, all right, everybody.
Good talking to you, Tim.
Yeah. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom. Bye-bye.